So this photograph, which is, of course, will go down in history. I was interested to see my reaction to this photo. My first reaction was, a bit of horror, shock. Then there was at the outer periphery, outer corners, nearly some sympathy. And I said to myself, Shauna, stop it, because I think sometimes a sympathetic response is just training. It's just what we're trained to do. We're brought up to be, kind, nice people, and sometimes it's just not appropriate. So I constantly have to sort of pull myself up and say, come on, girl. Stick to the facts. What are you doing? We cannot let your emotions cloud this actual situation. So after giving myself a thorough telling off, I've got to say that you're looking at a man who is facing consequences of his actions. I think that would be the best way I could sum it up. So let's go into the actual procedure just really, really quickly. So Mountbatten Windsor was seen leaving Elsom police station in Norfolk, near the Sandringham estate, about 7 p.m. London time. Now, as you know, clearly he was slouched in the rear of the vehicle, obviously trying not to be photographed. Now, they're saying that it was between 11 and 12 hours in custody, just a little bit over 11 hours in custody. And so as of me going live today, he's not been formally charged. Now, he was arrested so that they could question him under caution, and they have indicated that there will be more questions under caution to come. But the formal, it's really weird the way the UK justice system works, I think, but the formal charge hasn't been laid as of me going live. So we'll see what happens there. So the searches on his Norfolk residences have concluded, which of course they're talking about Wood Farm and Marsh Farm when they're talking about Norfolk. But the searches in Berkshire, which is Royal Lodge, are still continuing. So presumably he didn't get a chance to get rid of everything that was in Royal Lodge. Evidently there was, it's a 30 room mansion, I believe, and he just didn't have a chance to clear out all his junk. And presumably a lot of documents, one would think. So Thames Valley Police have been planning the operation for several days. We have now been told they're speaking to journalists, they're giving out information, they're trying to be as transparent as possible. Now, we know that the police, various branches of the police force, were assessing the complaint against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now, they had to apply for a search warrant, and by applying for a search warrant, they had to convince a magistrate that it was relevant and that it was important and to grant it, please. And they have to be granted those in order to do the necessary searches that they're still conducting at Royal Lodge. So obviously legal approval was needed before this raid and arrest. So it's interesting to hear that it was kept confidential, they claim. Detectives selected for the Confi-op. That's a little bit of insider police talk. I've always wanted to be a pretend policewoman, so Confi-op were unlikely to have been briefed beforehand. And I believe that. I believe that the detectives and police officers on the raid were unlikely to be briefed because they don't risk those details actually being distributed, particularly to the media, for the safety of the police officers too, because you could get, a crazy, fervent, rabid royalist placing themselves to defend the ex-Prince Andrew, if anyone indeed could be found in the entire UK to actually fulfill that role. But having people in my family that are actually police officers, it is pretty normal to keep operation details confidential. Now, officers may have been told to report early. Don't be late. This is a big one. They had to hand over their mobile phones, of course, in case they were, thinking about making a cool million by selling confidential video or photographs. Now, they claim that there was no communication with the palace. Now, there's a great deal of guffawing about that. People say, of course, the king knew. Of course, they would have given him the courtesy to be told. However, they are sticking to the point that no, Buckingham Palace was not informed. The king was not informed in advance of the impending arrest. And I guess we just have to go with what's announced. Whether you choose to believe it or not is up to you, of course. Now, I've already covered where the warrants were. Apparently, there was 20 officers from Thames Valley Police. They were supported by Norfolk Police. I gave a bit of a giggle and a laugh last night because, the Norfolk Police had to talk to CNN and make it very, very clear that they were very definitely assisting Thames Valley Police in this, Now, officers travelled 130 miles from Thames Valley HQ through the night from Kidlington, Oxfordshire, and it takes them about 3 hours, evidently. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to hear conversations in the car as they were heading down. And I imagine that they would have been quite nervous. I imagine that this would be a really big deal in all their careers, in all those 20 officers' careers. This would be a defining moment. It'll be a moment, a raid they'll always remember. They travelled in a convoy of unmarked police cars and arrived, as you know, at Wood Farm shortly after 8 a.m. So it's interesting, though, that there was a raid. I looked into it. There was a raid on Lord Mandelson's property. I sort of vaguely knew that there was. The difference was he wasn't arrested. There was a raid, but he wasn't arrested. Whereas Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested at the scene and taken directly in for questioning. So evidently the arrest was just standard police procedure. I looked into, just for fun, because, I figured that you might be interested. I'll bring up another photograph for you to look at while I prattle on. But the custody suite procedure in the UK goes as follows. At the police station, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor would have been checked in by a custody sergeant. Then the sergeant had to confirm the arrest grounds, that they were lawful, that there was authorised detention. He has to check all that. He has to search Andrew for items that could cause him harm. He would have been required to hand over any personal items, a phone, jewellery, watch, belt or tie. And he would have to undergo a risk assessment. People were, saying, I hope people are checking in on him, looking after his mental health. Well, they do that at the police station. It's part of being questioned under caution, that they do actually assess people. They assess their mental health. They assess if they have any medical issues. They assess that they are under the influence of any substances. Officers would explain his rights, including the right to free and independent legal advice. Interestingly, Andrew Mountbatten's lawyer that actually defended him against Virginia Giuffre had not been called and had no idea that this was unfolding and was not called to help. So maybe Andy can't afford him anymore, because back then, of course, the Queen was footing the bill for the lawyer. I believe he's a bit of a tight ass, though. I mean, let's face it, the guy's been doing under-the-radar financial deals on top of numerous very large and hefty, inheritances and trust funds set up in his name by the royal family, by the Queen Mother, by his father. So, the fact that he's a pauper, I just find very hard to believe. Also, Andrew Loney has revealed that some deals were to the tune of $3.84 million and some others $5 million, where he was presumably paid for services in these under-the-radar financial deals. So where's all the money gone, Andy? Too much Amazon shopping. Evidently, Royal Lodge is filled with Amazon packages, and he just cannot contain his spending. So finally, custody suite procedure. He had the right to notify someone of his arrest. So there are codes of practice to all this, and they would have been followed very definitely. They're not going to risk mucking this up. Can you imagine if they mucked up this one? Okay, so the King's statement I put up in the community very late last night because I was working on all of this. I won't read it to you because I know you've already read it, but I think the most really profound thing in it was the reference to him, that stark reference to him as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I know there was no alternative. I know the king had to refer to him that way, but it just really pointed out that now distance and how far he has indeed fallen.